Cool.
And then I'm going to start recording on QuickTime.
All right, I'll hit play as well.
Okay.
Or record, not play.
We are recording.
Nice.
All right, so I'm just going to do my little, I'm talking to Mona Eshaiker, licensed blah, 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 and then we'll just get into it.
Nice.
Okay. Full screen. All right. Today I'm talking to Mona Eshaiker, licensed therapist and burnout coach. Hey, Mona.
Howdy. How's it going?
Pretty all right over here. How about you?
Good. I started using Howdy for some reason. And I feel
like
like it works. Yeah. Especially in the public setting. I feel like it kind of mitigates, my brownness. Howdy. Like, it's like, I feel like automatically it puts people at ease. I use that shit to my advantage. Absolutely.
Wow. Is there any like Texan in your background at all?
There's no Texan at all. I just,
Wow.
I kind of like it. It's almost like a hey y'all. It's like kind of gender neutral, and
Yeah.
I find it a little like silly, so I enjoy it.
That's funny. It is very disarming. And it makes me think that you're like you don't take yourself too seriously.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Got it. That's like, that's right in line. Okay. I love that.
Cool. Well, first I was thinking, let's just share how we met, because it's such a funny, cool thing.
Yeah. So random. I mean, I guess you might have to go first because, we met because of my cousin. And I'll say this about my cousin is that she like gives as little detailed as possible. So I'll never know like motives or anything behind anything. She'll just be like, oh, I told somebody about you. She'll just say something like that. I'll never know what that means or who that person is. But yeah, I think you reached out to me first. Yeah.
Yeah. I have the first half of the story. So I found your cousin, through Jelly Los Angeles, the tattoo studio.
Mm-hmm.
And I was obsessed with her work. And I booked a tattoo. And I'll give like the slightly more detailed version, I guess, which is that I knew that I wanted a tattoo to kind of like mark a moment, like just to sort of commemorate this last year for myself. And as I was looking through her flash, I typically when I go get a tattoo, I don't know what I'm going to get. And so I just look through someone's flash and I wait for this feeling, which I think is kind of related to our work too. I wait for this feeling, and then I get this feeling of like, oh, that's mine. Like that is the right tattoo. And I was looking and looking and I was like, this is beautiful, but it's not quite the thing, And then I found tucked into a pocket in the back this drawing of this like floating sleepy wizard in a nightgown. And I was like, that is it. That is so it. And so she was drawing it, and then she was like, transferring it, and then we started talking as she was tattooing me. And I was sharing with her like I'm really trying to be aware of my nervous system, and like I can, I know what you're about to do, and I'm trying to think about like how to prepare myself for the pain so that it doesn't feel as like the shock is gone, and that'll like prevent trauma. That's what I was thinking about. So I was sharing that with her, and she brought you up, and she was like, this is really interesting. It's like reminding me of my cousin. And I was like, well, this is what I do. And she was like, yeah, you should meet my cousin. And then I reached out to you on Instagram.
Exactly. Like, yeah, I got a tattoo from your cousin. Our work is related. You want to like have a phone chat session or a video session.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the thing. She didn't tell me any information. Like there was just like very little of like what I knew. And I was like, oh, cool. That sounds nice. But then then I started following you and I was like, it's just so interesting about how related our work is. But also I love that our connection is my cousin Fama, because she's just like, I mean, we're the same age and she's my hero, like absolutely through and through. She's like the coolest person I know, and just like so like kind and like actually like a pure-hearted kind person, and like she makes me a better person just by being around her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I felt very connected, like even getting tattooed from her or tattooed by her. And then at the end, this is not related to how you and I met, but like she offered to drive me. Oh, I just want to hold for that.
Yeah. Is that outside your place?
Yeah. Okay. This is not related to wow. Shit. I might have to move into the other room. Um, this is not related to how you and I met, but she offered to drive me to my car because it was really late. Like I ended up leaving at like 11:30 or something at night. And at the end, I was like, "Can I see your face?" I was like, "I know this is like a weird question, but can I see your face?" And we both took our masks off because I was like, "I just spent like 6 hours with you, and it, we had this like tattoos are really intimate, and I have no idea what you look like." So that was great. We ended up just like revealing our bottom halves to each other.
I love that.
Faces.
That's so, I mean, it's so funny, right? With wearing masks as well as like, there's so much that gets lost with the like,
Yep.
just like in like the micro expressions, and if just like sense of safety too is like when I look back in pictures, I'm like, I look really like pissed off, but I'm actually smiling. But like, like there's just like there's so much information that gets lost. And anyways, yeah, I was just sort of like, and I can't imagine getting a tattoo and just like having just purely based on what that person is just saying and like energetic vibes of like just feeling like comfortable and safe with somebody.
You've sort of like hit on there like one of the things that I've noticed that I've gotten more sensitive to is a vibe, like an energy from somebody because I can't see their face. But I've also been noticing from a consent perspective, when you can't gauge someone's facial expression, it's really hard to tell how they're feeling. Like you can listen for it in their voice, you can listen for you can look for nonverbal cues, like are they looking at you, are they fidgeting, like what's their body language. But when you can't see half someone's face, it's really hard to gauge how they're feeling.
That's so interesting. Yeah, exactly. And we just have to, right, hope and like maybe just give like extra room for someone to say no or to like sit with their decision or something
Yeah.
if so much is lost. Yeah.
So that brings us to the middle of our Venn diagram, which I think consent and burnout are so incredibly related. And I would love to hear your story of your burnout story and how you became a burnout coach.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a licensed therapist in California, and I've been doing this work for over 10 years. And I feel like, especially, and I wonder if folks could relate to this, and I wonder if you could relate to this, just being in the healing field. There's almost this expectation that in order to heal other people, you have to sort of give up a piece of yourself, or like that, that work kind of comes first and then you kind of come later. And I grew up in like an environment where that like culturally was very accurate of, especially as a woman, of it's not about your needs, it's about the collective needs, and especially like the needs of elders. And so there was like automatically just growing up in the world thinking that authority figures should always be respected, elders should always be respected, whatever they want, that's like what we kind of lean towards. So doing that plus being in the healing profession, like it was just a perfect recipe for burnout. And there was this normalization, again, especially in like I think the social work and in like mental health, there's this normalization that you don't take breaks, and it's actually it's a badge of honor. And so I remember my first job after grad school was at a residential treatment center, which is it was a lot. It was just a lot because people were living there. So people were like in some sort of type of recovery, like a mental health recovery moment. And they live there, and that's where they get their therapy. And so you're, as like a practitioner, you're there where they live. So they're like, you could see that they come out of the shower in like a bathrobe, and then you're doing therapy with them the next. So there's already like a blur of like boundaries to begin with. And, starting out new, you take your cues from the people who've been there for a long time. So all the therapists there were, they don't take their breaks. People don't even sit down. It was at that point. I remember one day I just was feeling so hungry that I was just like, I know we're really busy, but I haven't taken my lunch yet. I have to take my lunch now. And my supervisor like stopped, turned around and said, are you really going to eat right now? And it made me feel like I ended up taking the break, and I'm glad I did, but it made me feel really guilty for even like, and I lost a lot of weight. Anyways, everybody there was just like really unhealthy, but like that was normalized. And those were the people who got ahead. So that's the other thing. So we're getting constantly like, so I'm getting cues as like a new therapist, like that's how you get ahead, like not having your needs met. But nothing, it never felt right. Like I think like we do this type of work and we like push past our boundaries, and there's always something that doesn't feel right. Also, because we're harming ourselves, like physically and emotionally and mentally. But I think like the first time that I actually like thought that this is not right is one of those coworkers at that place that I worked at ended up committing suicide. And I was just sort of thinking of like how, and she was really unhealthy. I mean, we were all unhealthy. I mean, we were all working past our breaks. You weren't allowed to take, I mean, you could take a break legally, but like, there was, it was like a workplace culture. And, she ended up taking her life. And I remember just feeling so angry at that workplace. And like they had a memorial there. I couldn't even like walk. I didn't even want to go in there. I didn't answer anybody's phone calls. I was just so mad, and like, not to like, I'm not going to blame everybody. It's part of the system. Right. But like, it felt like that was like, that's the worst case scenario. That's where burnout goes. And that's really like that path. So anyways, with that knowledge, I ended up like still going in the field, still working past my limits, being a little bit more self-aware. And I think like understanding like how like colonization and like capitalism work, like knowing that that's all part of like to keep that system alive is to have people work past their limits so they don't question. Because once you question where you're at, you realize, that this is, so I had that knowledge, but I'm still trying to make a living. We kind of like have both. And it wasn't until 2 years ago, my last job before I worked for myself, my last job was at a tech startup, which is also kind of interesting, of like going from like social work, like in the ground, like working with folks in need, being really burnt out by that. And then like having this, like, it was like a beacon of hope. It was like, oh, a tech startup, you get benefits. I was going to get paid twice as much as I would make normally, and I was like, they pay for your snacks, like just like stupid shit like that. And I was just like, wow. And so I ended up going to that, working at a mental health tech startup. And like, yeah, there's definitely, and this is part of burnout, there's definitely a honeymoon phase where you're excited. Yeah, there's a lot of work, but you want to prove yourself, and you're going to work past your breaks because you want to be like a superstar off the bat. And that all kind of caught up with me in the pandemic, like during the pandemic last summer, where it was just really, it got to a really bad point where like my boss was burnt out, her boss was burnt out. Like we were just all like operating from a place of like no fuel at all. And the work ended up being, the work was really, really difficult. And because I was like a manager there, whenever somebody was like, I need to speak to your manager, like I would get those type of phone calls, like just like really angry customer service people. And whenever somebody was suicidal, I would get those folks as well, because it's like, it goes to a manager. So it was, and because of like, it's like a tech place. So my computer would automatically go to sleep if it wasn't like, if I didn't move the mouse in 3 minutes. So I'd run to the bathroom on my breaks and run back. Because once my computer went to sleep, my Slack notification would show that I'm like away. And people in the workplace were using that against other people. Like, oh, I saw that they're not actually sitting at their desk because, now we're all remote. So it ended up turning into this thing where like, I was like, run to the bathroom, run to get water, and then like move my mouse really fast. Like even on weekends where I'm not at work, I had this automatic thing of moving the mouse just to like, it was like a Pavlovian moment. So I was, dealing with all that. And then our company got bought out by like this, like, I probably shouldn't say this on here. Who cares? It got bought out by like an insurance company. And like, I'll just be straight up. Like, I think insurance companies are evil. They should not exist. And they exist as a barrier for people to access health care that could save their lives. It shouldn't exist at all. So we got bought up by this insurance company, and then that's when all the budget cuts happened, and that's when everybody's caseload doubled, and this like beacon of hope, oh, okay, really turned into like just another fucking system, like just another tool to make money basically, and to like pat themselves on the back. So yeah, I was like working in, yeah, just like really poor hours, like really paranoid about leaving my computer. Yeah, the honeymoon period turned into stress, you know, like it goes from there, like honeymoon, you're working extra, but you're good with it because like you're really excited and interested actually. And then it moves into like the stress where like you'll have like some mild anxiety or some like mild like body aches, you know, like a headache or a stomach ache. And then once you sit in that stress cycle with for so long, then that turns into the chronic stress, then like continues to wear on your body. So then you go from like anxiety to like panic, or you go from like a stomach ache to like, you know, like actually like throwing up or something, you know, or like headache to migraines. Like it actually, then you start having those chronic health conditions. And then like the burnout is when you like just feel completely like you have no options. I think of like, I'm sure you know this, like psychological experiment back in the day, which was super like abusive to animals, but they would like, they created this electrocuted, like electrocuted box that a dog would stay in. So every time I try to leave the box, they would get like a mild like electric shock. And so they learned to just stay in that one place. And then once they removed that box, the dog was so scared it learned just to not even try to explore. It just like sat in that like outline of a box around itself. So I kind of always, I know it's really, really terrible.
I've never heard of that study. That's so sad.
I should have given like a trigger warning, like animal abuse. But I think of that because that they coined the term learned helplessness, of like when you've been chronically harmed for so long, you learn and to internalize this belief that like you have no options and you can't escape, and that's just the way it is. And that leaves, and I mean you talk about a sense of purpose, that leads to not feeling like you have a sense of purpose. You're completely disconnected with you're disconnected and misaligned with your values, with your purpose, and you just feel like that's the way it is. Like yeah, it's hard to really describe, but like I got to that point in the pandemic. It just really, like the stress just became overwhelming. And just being like totally vulnerable, I did experience like suicidal ideation, and I had friends around me who were leaning on me for their emotional support as well. So I was not at a good place. I totally experienced that burnout. I finally took a full week off of work, which was really a big deal because, again, like always feeling like I couldn't take a time off, like everybody was relying on me. So even taking a week off was really like important at that point. I took a week off. My partner and I went to I think it was Idlewild. So we went to like this like foresty place just to sort of get away and like disconnect. And her friend actually ended up passing away while we were on this trip. So she had to be by herself and like mourn and like take time. And that was really great because that gave me a moment to be completely by myself with my thoughts, which ended up being super helpful because I just got my journal out and I just kept writing on repeat, like, what do I want? What do I need? Like, what do I want? What do I need? And at this point, I've been like, again, like my whole life been conditioned not to be completely disconnected with my wants and needs. My work has reinforced that. And then now I'm here like feeling like life has no meaning. I don't want to be alive. I started having some serious like health conditions come up as well. And I kept writing, what do I want? What do I need? And then finally it was like, I need to leave this job. Like it just became crystal clear. I need to leave this job. Like you're licensed, you could have your own private practice. Like who can you rely on? Like it just became a crystal clear plan. And honestly, it only just took like maybe 30 minutes of just sitting intentionally by myself, came up with a plan. Who can I rely on? Who can I ask for help? And then I asked myself, like, when do I want to leave? And I said like, December 2020, like I can't go on beyond that. And anyways, I ended up like actually like following through. I reached out to those friends and we created a little working group together, and they're all in private practice. And they were like, we don't know one person who's not like doing okay for themselves. Like you could absolutely do it. Like here are some resources. So anyways, I've been working for myself since January 2021, and I mean, it's only been 4 months, but it's been quite a journey because then I find out that I'm doing a lot of like self-policing of like, oh, I can't leave my desk. Oh, I have to like, I'm doing that. So it's being very intentional about like stopping and like, and putting breaks in my day. So I actually could sit with myself. And so I could like intentionally like combat those like automatic beliefs and automatic thoughts about, you know, my, how to spend my time basically. That I felt like very long-winded. I hope I didn't bore you, but that's like my entire like story of like how I got to where I'm at now and like the experience with burnout at work.
Thank you. That I'm so glad to know that whole trajectory. And I really appreciate the sort of the background information and how you tie in even like being socialized as a girl and like cultural factors, and especially this idea of the collective over the individual.
Mhm.
Something that came up in my last 6-week course and then has come up again in this one that you've seen is this idea that saying no to your parent or family member is not just saying no in that moment, it's actually saying no to like your whole culture, and your whole family and like all of your ancestors, um, and especially with how powerful no can be and feel, that is that's just so much more to consider when you decide like I'm just not going to do the standard work that that my parents might look at and think is like safe for me to do and reliable, and I'll get health insurance and all this
Mm.
stuff. I also am really interested in this idea of learned helplessness. That really kind of struck a chord with me, and I went off into my own place. So I'm going to need to look up that and do
Yeah,
some
what
research.
came up for you?
Well, I have all these like autoimmune health and gut issues, and that image even of like the box and
Mm.
feeling like if I try to move outside of the box, I'll get shocked a little bit. And then even when they take the box away, like I think that's where I'm at right now, is that like the box has been taken away, but I'm still sitting there like I can't leave this, 4x4 area. The metaphor being like the 4x4 area is like this really restricted diet and this particular pill regimen and like these certain things that I do to stay really just not even healthy, but just like functional with like symptom management. And there is this like learned helplessness where I'm like, the pattern in my brain, thought pattern is like, you're never going to feel better than this. Like, this is as good as it gets. And there's sort of an element that I've been trying to peel away at lately around, like through my health stuff, I've learned to slow down and learned to listen to my body and really honor what it's telling me. And I think that there's like still the last trust piece between me and my body. And I have feelings about even like thinking that those are separate things. But like, for the purposes of this sort of thought experiment, like the last piece of the trust there is that my body needs to know that I will not push it, that I will still move slowly and I will still honor what it's telling me, and I will not push it past its limits, even if my symptoms are not as severe. So it won't need to scream at me. And I think it's sort of stuck in this place where it's like my body feels like it can't get any better, because if it does, I will stop paying attention to my boundaries or something like that.
Wow. That's really powerful. But right, like, I mean, I think there's some truth to that too, of like when we do push past our limits, we do have like actual biological things that happen to us. And if we've been conditioned to push past that and to ignore it, that's our only indication that like this is not okay. And so yeah, I think you're bringing up just a really good point of like so what happens when like you've been maybe even just like sort of stuck in that place or like frozen in that time? Like, how do you unlearn a lot of that stuff? And how do you tell your body that you're safe is a really big one. I'm in the middle of reading this book called Burnout by Emily Nagoski. Emily
Oh,
and
I
Amelia.
look at this.
Yes, come on, Burnout.
I have this one.
Oh, come as you are. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's perfect. This one came out first.
Okay.
And then Burnout is a book that it's her twin sibling, which is adorable, wrote together because I forget which one, but one of them ended up being hospitalized, but kind of related to like exhaustion. I think she was diagnosed with exhaustion, which I think we all know is just like burnout, chronic stress, right?
That's a diagnosis?
I mean, that's what they say in the book, but like, I think when doctors are like, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like IBS. They're like, oh, you poop a lot.
Right. Which is also a symptom of like chronic stress though. Like
totally.
I mean, right. That's like our body's right. Like telling us something because we're putting ourselves in a state of chronic like fight, flight, freeze, chronic stress survival mode.
Yeah.
And being in survival mode is a biological experience. So of course we're going to have like a biological like implications if we sit in that with like the stress hormones sort of pulsing through continuously. But so anyways, so that book Burnout, they talk a lot about your body needs to feel like you're safe. So we could tell ourselves mentally, you're not in the stress cycle anymore. Listen, you're safe. Like, right, you're being faced with a situation that might be similar to like a trauma you've experienced, but situation's different. You're actually safe. You could tell yourself that, but your body is still having a specific reaction. So how do you tell your body that you're safe? They actually go into how do you tell your body that you're safe, which is really useful.
Any tips?
You're like, tell me right now, like cliff
Yeah.
notes. I mean, long story short is like anything. It's whatever your body needs, but it has to be kind of like a physical thing. So like mentally is definitely like mindset's a big thing. And there has to be something physically that you can do to like feel safe. So she's like, some people just start crying uncontrollably, and I'm a crier. So I really I aligned with that a lot because sometimes I don't know. I've been watching a lot of Jersey Shore in the pandemic. But like, I've been crying in like the last 3 episodes. There'd just be like kind of sweet moments between friends, and it would just like trigger this just like totally like not in a. It's like not the amount that I'm crying is just not even close to like what I'm actually watching. But that just tells me that there's some sort of like I need to release, and like crying is like, it's like a very physical, like I'm wailing, there's actual like tears coming, and I feel so relaxed afterwards too. So they're saying just sort of like whatever it is, like it could be whatever it is for your body, but making sure you're having a physical reaction. And they use the example of like, like a big predator, like a tiger, like attacking a deer. Sorry about all these animal references, but like if the animal like maybe plays dead or like gets away, they do this thing where they like physically just like convulse and shake.
Yeah.
They kind of use that as an example of like that's what that animal needs to do, and like sometimes humans need to do some sort of like shaking or some sort of like physical movement to like shake it off, or like to that's the signal that your body that you're safe.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I took a class on polyvagal theory, and they had us like the teacher had us jump around or shake or dance, and she used the reference of like, when a dog like does that full body shiver thing, like it releases stress hormones, so it's a really good thing. Also, I'm thinking like tapping and all that stuff.
Totally.
So when you were describing at the beginning how like people in like helping and healing professions are sort of expected to like always be working, or like that you're second, what I thought you were going to say that I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on is I thought you were going to say that there's this sort of expectation that people in healing professions are fully healed themselves. And I've been running into that one a lot lately, especially as a person who teaches, because there is this I think when we talk about trauma and we talk about healing and helping and all this stuff, there's this common understanding that, or assumption made, that like I've got it all figured out and that's why I'm teaching it to you. Or like if I'm, offering these private sessions, it's because I'm perfect at this. And I deal with this with my clients, and like sometimes I've had to say, like, that therapists have therapists, right? Like you can't be your own therapist. I can't do what I do for clients to myself. There's a certain amount that I have these skills and I can use them and stuff, but like, when I like a month or so ago, I left my dog in the car for, I swear it was no more than 15 minutes. Like it was 15 minutes at most. It was not hot outside. The windows were cracked. She was under the shade of a tree. And when I got back to my car, and we were on our way to the dog park, I had to stop at the market I got berries and fish. That was all I got at the market. And it was, we were about to go to the dog park. And when I got back to my car, there was this woman trying to like basically break into my car. And my dog had run away the week prior. Like anyone who follows me knows that my dog ran away after I had her for like 9 days. And so I flipped out. I was like, get the fuck away from my car. What the fuck are you doing? That's my dog. Like I lost my shit. And afterwards I thought, God, like you have these skills that you're like unable to tap into in a moment of crisis, or like when you're having a stress response. I did not remember all my nonviolent communication training. I was not holding this person in a compassionate place in my mind. Like maybe this woman had some of her own trauma with a dog in the car or whatever. And instead I'm like cursing at her and screaming at her. So anyway, that's all to say, like, I have people that I work with. I have, students, and then even just people that I like meet online who sort of, my experience is that and what they've shared with me is that they're like, what do you mean you have trouble saying no, for example? Or like, what do you mean burnout? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sharing my tools and skills with you all because I'm working on this in real time for myself.
I feel like it's, bro, you're saying this, and to me, I'm like, yeah, of course, but it's so radical because no one says it. Like, I don't think even healers want to admit that, because I think there is that, there's that assumption that we have it all together. And like, and also it's like, well, how am I supposed to lead, or how am I supposed to, heal others if I haven't and done my, am 100% like perfect on this like area that I'm an expertise in. Well, I mean, there's no such thing as perfection. So it's just like you get into your own trap. I just really appreciate that you said that like out loud. Cause again, I just feel like I feel like that too, of like, I'm always just learning. Hell, I learn from my clients too,
Me too.
like it's really like, it's so symbiotic. And like, we might be just like had a few more experiences ahead. And like, that's why we could kind of shine that light, but like, no one's going to be completely healed ever. But yeah, anyways, I just like that you said that. And I kind of think that's radical. And I hope that like, I want to be like that a little bit more. And I hope more healers could admit that as well. Cause there is that assumption. But what comes with that assumption? So there is that assumption that like, we're completely healed and like, and we've done our work or whatever that means. But then, so what does that assumption like actually turn into? Like, that's sort of what, when you were talking, I was sort of like wondering what are those implications? And I'm curious to your thoughts, but like one thing that came to mind is like when somebody sees you, I mean, especially on social media, like we both have social media like presence, that there is this expectation that people will have complete access to you 100%.
Yeah.
That you actually can't put your own boundaries or say no. And I've come up against this just a handful of times, but I've only been doing my own thing for like not too long. So but this thing of like, when I say no, or if I say I'm full, or if I like refer somebody out, a lot of people, not a lot of people, a very small handful, but there's like this shock of like, they think that like, because I'm a healer, I there's like, you have an unlimited access to me, my energy, my time. And, or like having to answer personal questions online. And I'm like, I don't know you. Yeah. Like I get to share exactly how much I feel comfortable sharing and no more. And so, yeah, anyway, so that's something that I was thinking about, of like, okay, there's that expectation, but then what are the outcomes of that?
One of the outcomes that I see is this like I mean, it's all sort of related to like pedestalization, you know, putting people above you, which is the tendency to hierarchize anything and everything is also the result of structures of oppression.
Yes.
So anytime I sense that someone is like looking up to me, my red flag spidey sense goes off and I'm like, I get really uncomfortable. But then I have to recognize like, okay, this person views me as being in a position of power. And so I need to then like move with a whole lot of caution, because it also gives me a whole lot farther to fall in their eyes. And a big part of what my own like personal philosophy and how I move through the world is like, I'm gonna fuck up like a whole lot. I mean, all the time. And like, I'm not gonna ever stop fucking up. I'm just gonna get better at, I'm gonna fuck up less, and I'm gonna get better at accountability and better at apologizing and better at repair. Um, but what I've noticed is that there's sometimes this way that because of the work that I do, and I think your work is so related, there is this expectation that that I could never breach consent, for example, that I could never violate consent. And I just don't think that that's realistic. Like even when Betty Martin teaches the wheel of consent, she talks about the shadow side as like not part of life that you can necessarily completely eradicate. Like sometimes you have to live in that space, and sometimes people have conflicting needs. And like this ties to burnout. You know, if someone really needs my help and I'm totally burnt out, I'm at capacity, and they're like, Mia, you are the only person who can help me right now, I might push myself. And that I can do that consensually. I can consent to push past my limitations in service of you or in service of the greater good. And that could be seen as someone violating my consent or pushing my boundaries. But I'm like, that's sort of part of life. Like we can't necessarily totally avoid that. I notice new ways that I've violated consent in the past, or that I'm actively doing it all the time. So what I'm sort of looking at is this phenomenon of this like perfection ideal, when no it, even though I talk about consent as a practice, meaning that it's something that is like you can fall off,
Right. Right. Yeah. And the other thing about like the pedestal, when somebody's seeing you like right in that hierarchy, right, you're more apt to like, right, that's like a higher place to fall. But that also like it perpetuates that system of oppression, that somebody is better than you, or like you have to look outside of yourself for guidance or for like understanding. And I think that's part of capitalism, because the truth, I mean, the truth is people have enormous power inside themselves, and we just talked about how like powerful our bodies are and how powerful our intuition could be once we like pay attention to it. And that's something we freely have access to. But it's so easy to like kind of look past ourselves for that. And listen, I need that too. Like I constantly kind of like to look outside to get reminders of my own power, my inner strength. But I see that like that discomfort there too. Yeah.
Yeah, the feeling of like that. It's also like what I'm noticing is that a lot of people find their purpose through their own healing journey,
Yes.
And so like you've arrived to where you are because of the fact that you yourself are susceptible to burnout. And so you keep yourself in check around burnout, but it doesn't mean that you are never going to feel burnt out.
Exactly. Especially when these things are institutionalized and internalized, like that's going to be like a lifelong work. Exactly. And I feel like that's like, oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
I was gonna say, like, that's like, in my mind, that's the ideal situation, like someone who's actually walked the path and then like, did their own research and own self-discovery and then like develop tools or like pulled tools into their toolbox to share with others. Like, I just feel like that process, I would much rather be with a provider who's like gone through it themselves. And I feel like, again, there's like so much shame of like, well, I'm still in the work and like, who am I to like help other people? And it's like, you definitely have the right to help other people. Like, there's always going to be somebody who's going to like need something that you can offer that, again, just sort of like reflects their own empowerment. But I love when people have gone through it and done their own work. Like, I almost feel like that's like the power is right there.
I'm just hearing something outside.
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's okay. Sorry. Let me just. I have no idea what time I started recording this, and now I'm trying to make a note for my editor, and I'm like, I don't know, dude. Sorry. Okay. So. Okay. You were talking about this sort of.
Living in LA it's like there's gonna be something.
Can you hear that?
Not anymore. It's kind of like, yeah, it's gone. But there was like a little bit, sounds like a bus driving by.
It's a gardener, and I'm trying to figure out if they. I think I should go in the other room.
Yeah.
Oh man, sorry, Stella.
Is that your cat?
Stella's my editor.
Sorry, Stella. I called you a cat.
Stella. That's funny because when I adopted my dog, the rescuers had named her Stella. And I told Stella, and I was like, I can't have a dog named Stella because of you. But now you thought it was my cat.
I mean, I'm sure they appreciate it. I've definitely met dogs named Mona, and I'd be like, no.
Just so funny. Dog's named Mona. There's a dog at the dog park that I go to named Mia. And I sat next to her. I sat next to her owners the other day, and they were like talking to this other dog owner, and they were like, yeah, her name is Mia. And I just turned to them and I was like, my name is Mia. And we all had a really good laugh about it because they would also yell at their dog and be like, Mia.
And you're like, yes, I'm so sorry.
What?
What did I do?
Yeah. I guess I'll just hold this here. Okay. So until 43 minutes basically.
Nice. How much more time do we have?
Oh, I don't know. I usually go like an hour or so, but we can stop whenever you need to stop.
No, that works. Just okay. Pacing myself.
Oh.
Because I would love to talk about, and you've talked about this in your consent course, but about like pushing past your limits because there's money involved, like that exchange of like, when I think about people like in the workplace, I feel like a lot of that work is going past your limits a lot of times, and we justify it and we say it's okay when it's really not. I'd love to get into that, and I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts.
Let's talk about that because it relates to something that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to talk about, this honeymoon phase that you're talking about. I just taught this boundaries workshop to a like production company with a lot of really young interns, and some of what we were talking about was this idea of burnout because they're really excited and they're like hungry for the knowledge, and they just got this gig and it's super exciting. And as you said, there's also this idea of like, well, if my coworker is doing it, then they look better than me if I don't do it. So yeah, what do you think about that? Because like we do push our limits out of excitement or because there's money involved, and when is that okay and when is it not?
Right. I feel like I'm still trying to form a thought around it because, and this happens in the workplace, the people who have the worst limits and the worst boundaries are the people who get ahead.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and I'm actually just thinking now of like all like my managers, all the people in leadership in my work experience have all been like women or like female identified folks. And so I wonder, because I'm actually can't even think of like a dude or like a cis dude that like has been in a leadership position. I guess that must just be like a
In
health
social work.
in social work. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's always been the women who are like they're the first ones there and then the last ones to leave, and like that's been like modeled, and those are the people who get promoted and the people who move up. So, and that's real. And I think especially in that intersection of like, okay, if you're like a minority in the workplace, let's say like you're like femme or like female identified, let's say you're like a black or a person of color, there's already like so many stereotypes about you and your work like ethic and like who you are. And there's already like a lot to prove. And I feel like the pressure is even more heightened for like, like minorities in the workplace to push again, like to prove that they are dedicated to the work or prove that they're there. Honestly, like I think I have formed my thought around it, which is like most companies are just like are get into this cult mentality of like it's almost like I don't know, like a sorority or a fraternity of like you have to kind of like go through some sort of abuse to like make it. Like you have to start as an intern and you have to endure like low pay or no pay, and you have to like, oh yeah, you put up with them, we all, and that's the thing, it gets replicated because you're like, well, I went through that, so like you should go through that too. And that's how you get ahead, is you have to experience like a level of abuse, and then you get to appreciate when you get that salary job. You know what I mean? I don't think it has to be like that. And I feel like that's all like a conscious like decision that we all like choose to make and choose to replicate, um, in order to push this like, this cog ahead, this like money making machine, like whatever industry you're in. I mean, even in healthcare, people make a lot of money in healthcare, especially we talked about insurance companies earlier. Like there's a lot of money to be had. And it's at the expense of like our health and our bodies.
Right.
I'd like to find a workplace that doesn't do that, honestly.
That's like part of what I'm dealing with. I mean, and you're talking about like going into business for yourself too, and this sort of self-policing thing that like it is capitalism in my brain. Like capitalism is my inner critic.
Yeah.
Capitalism and my mother are my inner critic. So capitalism talks to me in the voice of my mother, like really condescending, telling me what the fuck is wrong with you, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was even having a conversation yesterday about this like mythical 40-hour work week that we strive for, which is born out of a time when people who were working 40 hours a week had full-time help at home in the form of their wives.
Mm.
So when I think about my 40-hour work week, I'm thinking about that includes grocery shopping, laundry, cleaning my house, errands, going to the doctor, going to the dentist, going to acupuncture. Like these are all things that I'm counting in my workday. So there was a while where I was like, okay, you just do all those things on Saturday.
Mm.
And eventually I was like, no, actually, because you are your own help. So you have to treat yourself. And I'm also, as my own boss, I've had to really ask myself, and I've done some journaling about this too over the last year, what kind of boss do I want to be? And not even because I'm going to be having employees, but because I'm my employee.
Mm.
So I need to give myself vacation time. I need to give myself sick days. And I have to be the one to hold those boundaries for myself. Like Mia, you said you're taking the week off, the day off, or the week off. Like, oh my God, whenever that has rarely happened. And I'm the one constantly checking my email.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to really think, I mean, and I'm still obviously working on it. Like, if I want to be the kind of boss that makes sure that my employees don't burn out, that they feel resourced. I need to be able to pay them a certain amount. I need to be able to give them a certain amount of and I need to not ask things of them outside of these hours. And the way to ensure that that happens is to model it.
Yes.
And to practice it myself.
Yes.
That's the hardest piece for me.
Exactly. Well, the modeling is so right, because again, we're taking cues from like our leadership, and that's what comes first, and that's why we need to like really like inspect those things in ourselves. Actually, I want to pose a question to you of like, what is that energetic pull when you want to check your email like off work hours? Like, what do you think what's that pull, or what do you think will happen if you don't do that?
That's a great question. I've wondered this myself. So one of the things is that sometimes really exciting things come into my email inbox. And so sometimes I'm bored and I get the pull of like, you could have an adrenaline rush here. You never know. It's like always sort of this question. I've really begun to notice the way that like if I have a memory, if something comes up in my mind where I'm like, oh my God, I said that really stupid thing, I will reach for my phone, looking for like a way out.
Yeah.
Even when I'm like watching stupid TV, you've been watching the Jersey Shore, I've been watching the OC. And when I'm watching the OC and like something really terrible happens where like someone makes a joke about, girls being bad at whatever, like there's so much terrible gender stuff and sex stuff in the OC, I will reach for my phone and I'll have to go like, hey Mia, what do you think is on your phone? That's like, why is this the like logical path? But you asked like, what do I think? What's the pull? So sometimes it's that if I'm working on a TV show, sometimes emails come in and they like need an answer really quickly. I mean, the same way that in social work you were describing, like there's this badge of honor of like, I don't take breaks. People in the entertainment industry have really, really bad boundaries, and they're very often very proud of them. Like I'm always available. I'm always at your beck and call. Like that's why I'm good at my job. And that's also part of why I'm sort of thinking that I'm not going to be in the entertainment industry for my whole life. I've seen it happen to my dad. My dad is a talent manager, and he is constantly on his phone. He cannot stop working. Oh no, this gardener. I don't know what to do. Let me just see like where he is, because maybe I can. Well, I don't know if that's really much better. I just closed the curtains and hoping that it's a little more insulated. Sorry, Stella. Okay. So yeah, I've witnessed this with like, it's not healthy. I don't like it. I don't want to participate in it. And there's not really so much of a choice in the entertainment industry. With my own work, there is this pull sometimes to check my email because something exciting might come in, like a job offer or like, whatever. Other than that, I don't know. I don't know why I'm doing it.
Yeah. What I check my emails for that like very similar reason of like sometimes there's like really good news, and I like to what opportunities or who's reaching out to me this week. at the same time, I'll get emails that are like a little stress inducing of like, oh yeah, we need this answer. Like, can you make this training on this date or something that I need to like figure out, but I definitely like don't want to do it on a weekend. Um, so I know for me, it's like a mixed bag of like, what's the risk? Like there's a risk and a reward. Like I could get some good news or I could get something that stresses me out a bit.
Yeah.
What I was wondering was like, something that I've been thinking about lately, which is like the scarcity mindset, which is if I miss an email, how will that affect my like, yeah, if I miss this really important email, I had that one opportunity.
Will they go to someone else or
We'll go to,
something?
yeah. And then did I just miss out on like something that, and when you work for yourself, you're literally like leaving your own life, like you're relying on yourself for income and making ends meet and making a living.
Right.
So I feel like sometimes, and this is kind of like the category that I tend to fall into of like, yeah, will I miss out on something like really important that will affect my like livelihood? It's never the case. And like, I'm definitely fine. You know what I mean?
It's never the case.
And I was talking to somebody so I'm part of this, like, it's called Ambition Unbox. It's basically like a group of like, like female or like cis female identified entrepreneurs. It's all these like badass women and like they're definitely like usually older than me. So I like just like being in the room of like older, powerful women. But I got into this conversation with one of them of like, right, like I'm catching myself like policing the way I spend my time and I don't allow myself to I'm still, yeah, I mean, we're talking about, I'm still learning to like take breaks during the day. Like I did yoga this morning and I felt really bad doing it. And I felt like I should not be doing yoga at 11, AM. Like I should be doing a work. Um, but I ended up pushing through it and it ended up being fine. So I was like telling this to this woman, and she's like, my business flourished when I started saying no more.
Yes.
She's like, when you keep saying yes, like that diminishes your no. And I don't know whatever she was saying. She was, basically like the more she said no in her work, the more she got like niched, or like the more that she said yes to things that she actually cared about and were actually passionate, which led to other like, other opportunities. And all this to say, it was just very useful and helpful for me to remember that like saying no, especially like as a self-employed person, doesn't take away anything. It actually adds to it, whatever you're creating.
I think that's so incredibly true. And it's really hard to live that way because we're rarely getting paid enough to feel like we can say no to stuff. And so it's a matter of like, it comes down, I think, in part to resources. Like if I got paid enough money to do these other things, then saying no would feel really good. And that's part of why I continue to do stuff that pays me really well that I don't love to do. But what you're talking about, I think the way that like saying no helps you carve out your niche is that I think about the work that I do, like regardless of what it is that I'm doing. I think about a body of work like an artist would. And I mean, I've had various times in my life where I'm like more or less of an artist. And right now a lot of the work that I do is not art, but I still look at it as a body of work. So like if I'm looking at how I want my resume to look, I love that my resume includes whatever, like I don't need to get into details, but like this job and this job and this job with this person and this person and this company and this organization, and that I took this class and this class and this class. Like that to me, when I can look at my resume and I go, this is a really accurate reflection of me, like this body of work authentically represents who I am and what I believe and how I show up in the world, as opposed to this idea of like this sort of universalist idea of like being as versatile as you can possibly be. And that's the thing that's like, I just say yes to anything that comes through my desk. And it's really damaging because it's damaging to you internally because it damages your sense of purpose. You don't have to be everything for everybody. You don't have to be the right fit for everything. In fact, that's what having a network is often for, to be able to say, actually, I think you want so and so. You know, like someone comes to me for burnout and I'm like, actually, I think you want Mona. As opposed to saying like, yeah, of course, yes, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Because that burns me out. And it also tells, like, it chips away at their trust in me. I end up not doing as excellent of a job as I could have if my heart were fully in it, if I don't feel empowered to say no.
Totally. Yeah. And this is something that I've learned also of like starting my own business is that I at this point in my career give myself permission to say no to clients, like absolutely. And even if it's like aligned, like even if what they want to work on is like similar to like what I do, if there's not like if there's just sort of like an energetic vibe, I also like definitely don't see very many like cis males, and like that is like my prerogative and I still stand by that. I do have a few and like they're great. But just like I just choose not to, and I used to feel bad about that. Um but again, like we get to protect our and we're the only ones who get to protect our time really, and our energy and where it goes. And every time where I've had like a red flag that comes up and I've ignored it, every single time that is like escalated into a situation that like took me so long to get out. Whenever I crossed like a boundary or said yes to something that I really didn't want to do, like it's always led to like a situation that I'm just like, oh God, like I could have totally avoided that. And that's my guide. That's my lesson to like give myself permission now to like only say yes to like soul aligned to clients.
Yes.
Like they feel it, I feel it. Like we know instantly it's a click and it's a connection. And then our work is hella strong. Like then we're just doing like again like soul aligned work where it's just like we're right place, right time, like right person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's right. That gives me purpose. That helps me like remember like yeah, I'm like following my dreams and like I'm giving back and like this feels really aligned and feels really great. And then hopefully getting that in response from the client too, of like them feeling like empowered, like this was like a good fit for them too.
Right. I want to, before I ask you my closing question, I want to ask, I think what's coming up for me in the way that you're describing this, like when you said soul aligned clients, and I even think of like my business coach says like heart centered people and heart centered work. You can of course still feel depleted. You can of course still burn out and push yourself past your limitations, but it's not as easy to do so when you're working with people that you feel that way about.
In fact, you might even have the tendency to push past it because it is like such a
like
heart
it so
aligned.
much.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think I wonder if that goes back to like the honeymoon phase where like that you make an excuse of why, because it does, I think, again, it feels good. Like, listen, look, I'm going past a limit and that actually feels good. Yeah. It's like, what I learned in your class, what is it? Like serving, the like serving, giving, you it does feel good sometimes to give something in service to somebody. But then like knowing like at what point does that end? And the more you do that, the more you're kind of showing that other person that like that's normal behavior, and they're going to start expecting like going sort of past or above and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I try to hold my boundaries about like my quote unquote office hours like pretty strictly, unless for whatever reason, like this past week, I don't respond on weekends to clients and to emails, and I talk to clients on Signal throughout the week. But like Friday, my day kind of was a little bit upheaved, and I was able to just sort of relax for much of the day. And so I was willing to then respond to anyone who wrote to me on Friday on Saturday. And like that felt fine to me, So I think, yeah, like both are true, that you might push past your limits a little bit because you're enjoying it so much. But at the same time, I think it's harder to feel so depleted because the work is so nourishing, so long as you are allowing yourself to say no to stuff that doesn't feel that way.
Exactly. And not putting yourself in a trap where now you feel like you're expected to do it, and maybe that person's not even expecting you, but then you were like, oh, I already did this thing, so I have to keep like pushing past. Right. And I think that that all goes back to just taking it slow and like just being really in touch with like your intuitive yes. And that's like definitely something that I'm working on, and why I'm in your course right now, honestly, because just the like awareness around it, because my automatic thoughts are to not do that. So like it
Mhm.
has to be it has to be a practice, and it has to be something that like I'm intentionally being aware of. I think that's really what kind of it comes down to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The awareness for sure. Okay. So, my wrap up question is, can you share three of your most influential um, anything? So, like people in your life, media you've seen, heard, read, consumed, conversations you've had, places you've been, like whatever it is, three things that you think were most formative for how you think today.
Wow, that's a really great question. And like giving me, okay, let me think. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes up is spirituality, and that's something that I've never that's a new thing for me. So that's something that I used to be like not just like agnostic, but there was like some atheist moments in me when definitely in my like teens and 20s. Um anyways, and then my mom passed away. She died about 4.5 years ago now, and it was just like really sad to grieve, thinking that that's it. Like there's just like then that's the end of her being. Um, and then I ended up having a moment with the psychic that just was like blew my mind, and they knew shit that nobody knows, like where a box is in a house. Like it was just like there's just no way anybody would. I mean, it was just the level of detail was incredible.
Oh.
Um, yeah, that happened about like 3 years ago. So then I had a spiritual awakening of like, wait a second, listen, we don't know what's going on. I don't know. And I think we would be like, remiss to think that we know what exactly is happening like in the universe and in the world. But I really do believe that there's stuff energetically that we can't see, but we could feel if we pay attention. So definitely the spirituality piece has been like life changing for me. Especially to have perspective. So whenever there's something that like happens that, a pain or a harm in some way, or a hurt or a loss in some way, um, having that spiritual lens really does help me take a step back and see what the lesson is in that, and like and see of like take the loss as like a lesson, and see what how I grew from that, has been like enormous for me. So I think spirituality would be like a very, very big one there. But I'm trying to think of like actual resources. Um, yeah, like Louise Hay. I don't know. She's like they call her like the godmother of like self help or whatever.
Mm.
She's awesome. She's so badass. So you could look her up on YouTube. You could like you freely could have access to like her works online. Um, so yeah, spirituality. Louise Hay is a big one. Um, Also like asking for help. I'll say this is the third one for me, is like
Yeah, asking for help.
asking for help has been another big one, especially in my own journey. There's so much pride in like wanting to be like, I got this, I'm independent, I could figure it out. And those are all true things. And there's so much resources out there. And there are people who like genuinely want to help. Um, and I think it can be easy to be suspicious of help, and thinking maybe somebody wants something in return that you're not willing to give. But the power of like, and not to gender this, but like women have helped me out so much, especially my business right now. It's like, it's mind blowing. So, yeah, being open to accepting help, asking for help is a big one. Um, I would definitely recommend that, especially if you're in a place where you think you might need it.
Mm-hmm.
Louise Hay and spirituality. Those are my three.
Beautiful. I love it. All right, Mona. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. I feel like we could do this 3 more times.
Yeah, this was awesome. I love speaking with you. Thanks. I'm glad we met, and I think
I'm
there was a
too.
reason why we met. So I'm glad to continue our our relationship in the future.
Yeah, I look forward to whatever. I feel like we'll find ways to collaborate in the future, and I'm excited to see whatever that is. And I'll see you in class.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I'll
in
see you
like
soon.
an hour.
Awesome. All right.
All right. Bye.
Bye.